This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit. What do you guys want to talk about?
Yeah, don't worry, I'm not going to go into another one of my philosophical diatribes. After all the WWF content I watched over the weekend, I don't have enough stored brain cells to be able to do another rant like the one I did on Friday. It is kind of amazing, though. You look at the calendar, we've already made it to May of 2023. Yeah, I'm old enough to remember sitting here in the studio trying to come up with my top 20 matches of 2022. And I was desperately trying to come up with 20 matches that I actually thought were any good. But we are approaching the midway point. Before you know it, it'll be coming up on year 2, I believe, of the FSWR channel. Yeah, we were making content back in 2019. I just sort of took a break from everything after the whole scamdemic period. Doesn't mean everything I've watched since then has been tearing the roof down. Far from it. Especially with modern WWE content. After everything I've seen and read about unfolding in the last 3 or 4 weeks, pretty much everything tying into the fallout from WrestleMania, didn't take them long to completely kill my buzz. We'll talk about that SmackDown show in a little bit. Good God. Just sitting here trying to recall it is nearly putting me to sleep. Not that Retro Raw was a captivating show by any stretch. I know I've been a little inconsistent with the channel plugs too, so before we shred Raw apart, make sure you check out the show every Monday and Friday here on either YouTube or Rumble. You can subscribe to the channel, like the show, leave a comment. Feel free to smash the Rumble button over on the other platform if you're watching us there. This weekend's going to be a pretty standard Monday show. Next week is the WWE Backlash show on The Cock. I am not planning on doing a preview for that show because I took approximately 5 seconds to look at that card as currently advertised, and I realized quickly thereafter it's barely even worth a regular review, much less a preview. Right now, the only thing there that remotely grabs my attention is the Brock Cody match, and all that buildup has been mostly happening on Raw, and it still doesn't have much of an appeal on paper because it's just a regular singles match with no belts or stipulations on the line. Maybe things can change between then and wherever they go on Raw, but yeah, we'll see how that goes next weekend. May the 6th. We'll add it on to the Monday special. I will probably include the SmackDown report as is. Maybe I'll gloss over a few things if they directly relate to the pay-per-view, and it'll kind of be redundant by the time the Monday show comes around. But we'll try to include all 3 pieces as part of the podcast. Do not expect the Backlash review to be the most detailed analysis. Just going to be very forthright with that. Not to immediately spread doom and gloom before we get to next weekend, but the SmackDown show should be an omen for what the future holds on Fridays. Before we get there, though, let's talk about this Retro Raw. And while we're not in the deep end of the pool when it comes to bad Raw programming, wouldn't say we're lurking near the shallow end either. As I've been saying for a while now, these shows are only going to get progressively worse from here on out. It's, I think I've used this analogy before. It's kind of like reliving a lot of the Nitro era from WCW. From like 95 to late 97, we're all thinking, man, the show's great. It's exciting. You got this NWO stuff. Sting's like one of the hottest talents on the show right now. Everyone's into virtually everything going on with the TV product. And then from like 98 onward, just takes a fucking nosedive. And for its own comedic purposes, recalling some of those latter Nitros are fun by their own right. The WWF era from 94, 95 to like late 97, that is another matter entirely. It's bad, but I can't even say it's entertaining bad. It's just flat out bad. 94 was only kind of scratching the surface. These shows, I would say, are more boring than they are bad a lot of the time. And we've covered it too. You basically have a formula with these Raw shows. You get one main event caliber match every week, and the rest of the show is a bunch of meaningless squashes or blasé promo segments. Sometimes the squashes are fine, depending on who's in them. But, the other thing to keep in mind too is that these shows are only still about 45 minutes long. So we take it for granted now, but wait till we go to 2 hours. This particular show kind of followed that regular pattern again. We open with the advertised main event for the show, the WWF Tag Team title match with the Quebecers versus the Head Shrinkers, set up on last week's show when Captain Lou Albano went to President Jack Tunney and got the match signed. And if you didn't already know what direction this was headed based on the opening lines from the Macho Man, I don't know what to tell you. Anything can happen in the WWF. Gee, I wonder what that could imply. Now, you might recall from last week, my recollection of the WWF tag scene in 1994 is very scant. And by scant, I mean I pretty much don't remember a goddamn thing. So while I was not directly caught off guard by the title change here, it did seem kind of odd, considering how much stock Vince put into Jacques and Pierre as the heel champions with Johnny Polo. We'll talk about that in a minute, but they did some small angle stuff here to keep it interesting. Of course, it's all head shrinkers in the early goings, so when the Quebecers are on the verge of losing, they all try to hightail it to the back. But the smart ring veteran, Earl Hebner, tells Howard Finkel to announce that if the Quebecers get themselves intentionally counted out, they will not only forfeit the match, they will also forfeit the titles. So, of course, the heels come sprinting back down the aisleway begrudgingly, and that keeps the match going. When they come back from commercial, the heels are still getting their asses kicked, and the Quebecers end up gaining control with some heel shenanigans behind the ref's back. They're working over Fatu for the heat, cheating, using all the dirty heel tactics. I think one of my favorite parts here, actually, there's a spot where Jacques went to try and give Fatu a body slam. Keep in mind, this was a little before Fatu really bulked up, before he became Rikishi later on in his career. Like, he was a big dude already. Here, I would say he was probably somewhere in the ballpark of 320 to 330. When Jacques goes to deadlift this guy, I can't even say he yelled in pain. He squealed. Probably thinking to himself, fuck, this dude's heavy. But credit to him, he got the big lunker up. And they come back from their next commercial. Babyfaces end up getting the hot tag. Samu's in there beating up the Quebecers 2-on-1. That ended up leading to one of the scariest things I can recall seeing in a match in quite a while. And maybe I'm just remembering things incorrectly, but I'm like 80% sure I saw this exact same spot happen with the Head Shrinkers back when we reviewed the 94 Royal Rumble. Do you guys remember me talking about a spot where one of the Head Shrinkers ran full speed toward the ropes and ended up getting caught between the top and the second rope? Looked like the guy snapped his neck and died on the spot. A very similar spot happened here with Samu, where he got his head caught between the two ropes. And after seeing this again, I'm not entirely convinced that he did not do this on purpose. Like the first time, okay, I can believe that was an accident, but seeing it almost verbatim in the exact same fashion here, no way that was unintentional. Now, granted, it was still scary, and you might ask yourself, why did management permit the head shrinkers to do this spot? Beats me. I mean, I thought the guy killed himself. Somehow he didn't, though. I don't know how. An act of God, perhaps. But, yeah, if you see these guys trying this shit in 2023, make sure you call them out. Don't do this shit. Not a good idea. Another great feat of strength seconds later was Jacques hoisting up Samu for a pile driver. Actually being able to hold the guy up there for a few seconds and walk around with him before dropping him. That also did not look easy. And of course, the heels missed their double-assisted flapjack. That gave Samu a bit of a break. Meanwhile, on the floor, Johnny Polo got sucker punched by Afa. And things kind of broke down with all four guys. While Hebner was holding back Fatu and trying to get him on the ring apron again. The Quebecers had a mistimed spot where Jacques accidentally punched Pierre. And I think the idea was that Pierre was blinded temporarily, so he accidentally punched Jacques in the head. Air quotes around that. That could end up leading to something down the road. Hell if I remember. In any case, Fatu and Samu got in there and wrecked shop for a little bit. And the finish was pretty great. They hit Jacques with a double-team face plant. One of the head shrinkers then sucker punches Pierre off the apron. And he basically takes a pratfall and lands flat on his back on the floor, which did not look pleasant. And then the head shrinkers hit their big splash from the top rope. 1, 2, 3. Crowd literally shits themselves with excitement over this title switch. Like this, I think, got a bigger pop than when Sammy and Owens beat the Usos for the tag straps at WrestleMania with like a year's worth of build. This got approximately 6 weeks of build at about twice the decibel level of elation. And, oh yeah. It was a fun match. I enjoyed it. Interesting choice for a title switch. I'm sure Rick and Scott were sitting in the back having a wondrous time watching that go down. Probably thinking to themselves, get us the fuck out of this place. Just buying out the remainder of their contracts at that point. But I dug this. Crowd was hot for it. Got enough time. Samu and Fatu randomly turning face with Albano was very sudden. But, I mean, it's not like the WWF fans were going to scoff at it. So, I give it a thumbs up. Very good start to the show. Then we had Todd Pettingill doing a King of the Ring update, which was not a thumbs up. Not because of the actual segment, but because it was Todd Pettingill. And this was a bit of a nostalgic moment in the sense that I always liked the King of the Ring concept. I always liked the idea of using it as a way to sort of build and groom up-and-coming main eventers. You know, they kind of got away from that formula in the latter years, which is a shame. Because the initial idea of the gimmick was always cool. You know, it was still always treated like one of their big events they ran every year, too. Like, you had the Big Four with WrestleMania, the Rumble, Survivor Series, and SummerSlam. And then you had that King of the Ring special as like a fifth event. And it was something that everybody kind of looked forward to every year because there were usually several possibilities of who could win. And that was sort of the main draw of it. Now, the 94 King of the Ring actually happened in the Baltimore Arena, which is more interesting timing, considering we literally just reviewed the 1987 Crockett Cup tournament, which also happened to take place in the Baltimore Arena. Right now, there wasn't much of a card update because they were still in the prelim stages of the qualifying matches. But, you know, Todd took a minute to kind of run down the concept of the tournament and that whole deal. It was fine. It's Todd Pettingill talking, so you take it with a grain of salt. He's better than Excalibur, but that's already a pretty low bar to begin with. Then following that, we had Tatanka out for a quick squash against Derek Domino. And they're still running with the story of Tatanka and IRS, the whole feud over the native headdress, which IRS defiled. So they had Chief Jay Strongbow out there to talk about the incident and basically put over that Tatanka's out for blood. And he spent several minutes beating Domino up, all the while Vince was mentioning other side story material. Something about Jeff Jarrett dressing up as a fake doink so that he could beat up the midget dink. You know, far be it for me to come up with the controversial takes. If Dink had a hard time recognizing a fake Doink the Clown, he probably deserved the ass beating. Tatanka won with the Samoan drop. Then we had another King's Court segment. I believe this was the 4th week in a row we've had one of these things. This time with special guest Diesel, the now reigning Intercontinental Champion. He defeated Razor Ramon last weekend on, I guess it would have been WWF Superstars. And I should mention too, before we talk about the Diesel stuff, you know, Lawler spent about 2 minutes running down Roddy Piper on the microphone and cracking jokes about him basically being a worthless sack of shit. To which my follow-up line reads, I can only venture a wild guess as to where this is all leading. There's something called the art of subtlety. And then there's just going so hard with calling somebody out. If the match doesn't happen, then it's the ultimate dick tease. But keep that one in your back pocket for a little later on. They kind of recap the fallout to the Diesel Razor match. They talked about why Shawn wasn't there this week, showing the footage of him taking a hell of a bump off the top turnbuckle into the guardrail. He sacrificed his body for Diesel in order to ensure that he won the belt. For the greater good, or so we were led to believe. And, you know, Lawler and Ash are out there shooting the shit. The main premise at the end was Lawler asking, what is next on the agenda for Diesel? And then he says that even though the IC title looks nice, what he's really after is the World Wrestling Federation title. So he tells Brett that he's looking for him, and he better be on the lookout. To which then got me thinking the moment he said that, where the hell has Bret Hart been? It's been like 3 weeks since we've seen the guy. Now, granted, I know they only have about an hour to fill guys up for the television show, so not everybody's going to be on every single program, but it did take me a minute to realize that Bret was still the champion. It's probably not a good thing. But again, you know, following the career trajectory of Nash in the WWF, you kind of see where they planted the seeds for that program early on. Obviously, they were still pretty deep into the Owen Brett feud by this point, but, you know, they introduced the idea with Diesel, so that was all well and good. Not a particular fan of that program, historically speaking, but, yeah. We'll save the conversation. Trust me, it will be worth it. In the meantime, more Undertaker cameos. And on a scale of 1 to wretched, in terms of bad acting, this was about a fucking rotten. What do we have here? I wrote a lot of these down. Car mechanics, school children, firefighters, and jewelers. All allegedly seeing The Undertaker in some form or fashion. According to the young girl in the classroom, he was sliding down the slide. The jewelers also said that he came in to buy some luxury items. I don't know how these all stacked up to the sandwich artist skit we saw last week. But I just love the idea that we're all supposed to take it at face value that these people are not coked up on drugs and that they are actually seeing The Undertaker in broad daylight. We don't see him, obviously, but random citizens do. And we just take their word for it, that they're not on crazy pills. Some reverse psychology of the Hogan Warrior mirror angle. I couldn't tell you what's going on here. It also does make you question, what was The Undertaker doing on school grounds? Hanging out in the jungle gym area? Why is The Undertaker purchasing jewelry? Why is The Undertaker hanging around a random car mechanic shop? Why is The Undertaker buying a sandwich? I have no answers to any of these questions beyond it's all fucking stupid, yet somehow, some way it works, literally because it's The Undertaker. And he sort of made a career out of defying all incomprehensible bullshit. Trust me, if you think things are wacky now, just wait until all the voodoo shit later on when we get to the Attitude Era. It's the genius of the gimmick. I'm sure Yokozuna didn't like hearing the news about The Undertaker's rise from the dead. He was out there in the main event to wrestle a handicap match with two unnamed geeks. These poor job guys were so futile, they didn't even get name graphics. Now, of course, Yoko's out there just having a ball wiping the ring mat with these dweebs. The best finish, too. A double stacked up bonsai drop. Made even better by the visual where you see the two job guys are laying there and they put the camera on them while Yokozuna's climbing up to the top turnbuckle. Their facial expression reads something to the extent of, "Please, for the love of God, do not let this fat ass break my nose when he comes down. Or puncture a lung." It's like, I don't even know how you brace for impact in a situation like that. Like, you can tighten your gut all you want, but when you got all that girth coming down straight down on top of your chest like that, dude, good luck. I mean, I know Yoko didn't have a reputation for being the stiffest worker, but, I mean, if that dude wanted to rib you and legitimately sit down with all of his weight on top of your body, I don't think he would have held back. So that was a fun squash. In the literal sense, too. And right as Yoko gave the job guys two more bonsai drops, here comes Earthquake to make the save and send Yoko packing, subsequently challenging him to a match after the commercial to find out who the biggest and baddest man in the WWF is. So there's your temporary placeholder feud for Yokozuna. Not what I would call a step up, considering he was literally the WWF champion a few months ago. Now he's feuding with Earthquake in a mid-card TV program. But we did already kind of cover the evident downfall of Yoko's career after he dropped the strap to Brett. I mean, this was sort of the end of the road for him as a main eventer. I mean, he stuck around for a few more years, obviously, and we all kind of know how things got a little out of control with the weight. But even so, man, every time I go back and watch a Yokozuna match, it's almost unbelievable seeing a guy that size, but he's still able to have relatively good matches. And he was truly one of a kind. Wasn't the most exciting way to go out this week, but yeah, the tag title match was at least good. But you can see how they're layering stories in the lead up to the summer. The Diesel push is making headway. You can see the direction they're eventually going to take with him. You know, Shawn Michaels hanging out in the background and advancing up the card slowly. Lawler teasing the thing with Piper, which was only provisional in the lead up to the King of the Ring. But, you know, it is what it is. It's not the most captivating period for the company, as you can probably tell. A lot of the mid-card angles are, well, exactly that. Mid. Tatanka and IRS are fighting over a fucking headdress. Yawn. Earthquake and Yokozuna in a Haas fight. Obviously, Vince was beating off to that one during the creative meeting. And then there are the Undertaker cameos with all the hideous D-level acting. So bad. Just awful. And like I said, man, it only gets worse from here. Only gets worse. Thought about doing that bit myself, but nothing beats the original. Fucking 20-some years later, and that's still the best Nickelodeon moment of all time. Some of y'all aren't even old enough to remember when that episode came out. Yeah. Anyway, that was my half-assed attempt at trying to build up this WWE draft. Because Lord knows it was worth any of the build-up by the time the show was over. And I won't be the first to ask this. I've been asking this same question for well over a decade now. But I will reiterate my point. Why is the WWE draft still a thing when it is obvious the brand split has not actually amounted to anything in years? Why do we care about who winds up on Raw or SmackDown when people can just sporadically show up on either show and nobody bats an eyelash? Why do we need a brand split in 2023 when WWE barely has enough talent to make one weekly show bearable? All of these questions, I have no answers to. But every year they do this, we're told, it will forever change the landscape of the company. And then 100% of the time, it never does. By the second month of the draft, it's right back to normalcy, where guys just randomly show up on either brand every week. And everyone looks right past it. So with that all said, if you can discount the fundamental issue, the fact that the draft is bullshit and means absolutely nothing, well, you can sort of judge this show as a standard episode of Friday Night SmackDown. Meaning that it was boring and uneventful. I'm of the opinion that the only reason they did the draft anyway was just to give Hunter an excuse to be on camera. We all know that guy's ego is bigger than his fucking nose. That guy will look for any excuse to be out there soaking in the reaction from the fans. In the history of the World Wrestling Federation, World Wrestling Entertainment, whatever you want to call it, I can't think of a single person that loves that red light more than Triple H. When the cameras are on, that guy is front and fucking center. But anyway, came out to open the show and lay out the ground rules of how everything's going to go down. This was obviously night one of the draft, so the other half would be conducted on Raw the following Monday. And while he said that everybody was eligible on both brands, he also covered the possibilities of a hand-select group of names from NXT also being part of the draft. So in other words, the ones that actually matter. Or so we thought. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on. I also liked here, I thought this was funny. He also talked about the post-draft, which will be taking place on May the 8th. the following night after Backlash. And by post-draft, he may as well have just said, the remainder of the roster then means absolutely nothing to the overall bottom line. The people we probably forgot were still even signed to the company. So whoever's part of that equation, sucks to be them. Anyway, well, our first round was selected from the top of the show, and here's basically what we had. And again, you're going to see a pattern to this whole draft concept and why it's so fucking stupid to begin with. Officially being drafted to SmackDown as a 3-person unit, Paul Heyman, Solo Sikoa, and the Universal Champion, Roman Reigns. So I take it that means, provided this draft doesn't wind up being all for nothing by month 3, this would insinuate that Heyman, Sikoa, and Reigns are now exclusive to SmackDown only, and they won't be appearing on Raw anytime in the future. Put an asterisk next to that. For Raw's first pick, we had Cody Rhodes, which isn't particularly all that shocking to me. I mean, Cody's practically been exclusive to Monday Night Raw already, with the exception of like 1 or 2 appearances he made on SmackDown in the build-up to WrestleMania. Vice versa with Roman, Heyman, and Solo. I mean, those guys have already mainly been SmackDown guys anyway, so I mean, right from the top, we're not really breaking any new grounds here with this roster shakeup. But for the next SmackDown pick, in more ways for WWE to make things as illogical as humanly possible when it comes to the draft, current reigning Raw Women's Champion Bianca Belair will now be drafted to SmackDown. Okay, stop right there. First of all, what? And second of all, so what? Does that mean she now has to be stripped of the Raw Women's title? That would only seem fair. Did we get an answer to this? No, of course we didn't. Just Bianca Belair, Raw Women's Champion, now on SmackDown. On to the next pick. Meanwhile, I sit here and have about 1 million unanswered questions that will probably continue to remain unanswered until the end of time. In any case, the final first-round pick for Raw was Becky Lynch, which I don't really have much of an opinion on. I mean, she's primarily been on Raw anyway, and I haven't watched Raw since the Stone Age. Quite frankly, I haven't watched Becky Lynch's content in a long time. I mean, that's how irrelevant she's been in the last year plus. I don't even think I watched a WrestleMania match this past year. So, whatever, okay? Becky's on Raw. And that means I won't be seeing much of her. Discount any of the premium live specials we cover. So after about 7 or 8 minutes of talking, we followed that with the exact thing you would expect. More talking. Here come the Usos for a chit-chat. More like another freestyle rap. And, well, they really didn't say all that much, aside from trying to hype up the main event for later on. The WrestleMania rematch for the tag belts with them versus Sami and KO. They did bring up the fact that Roman's basically been ghosting them, but they're still going to dedicate the match to him later on. Because after all, blood is thicker than water. So, of course, here come Sami and KO to respond. And Sami's bringing up all the obvious talking points here, saying that the Usos are so hell-bent on believing that everybody's on the same page in the bloodline, yet Jimmy and Jay can't see through their own bullshit. They can't even recognize that Roman, Heyman, and Solo are all drafted to SmackDown. The Usos not included in that conversation, which is a valid point. And, they try to fire up on each other at the end. Owens said that he's sick of all the talking and he just wants to fight. So naturally, they throw all their mics down and proceed to just stand there and look at each other awkwardly for about another 30 seconds. Yeah. Owens was so ready to pick a fight that he proceeded to spike his microphone and then continued to stand there and do nothing. Lovely stuff. Captivating television, if I do say so myself. Anyway, we'll cover that match later on. So at this point, we were about 20 minutes into the program before the downbeat of our first wrestling match. After a few more infomercial plugs and a random Bianca Belair selfie video from a hotel room where she talked about being excited to represent everybody as the, quote, SmackDown Women's Champion, unquote. Then we cut to the ring for our first match. And it's Butch versus LA Knight.
Yeah! Yeah! I said pipe down, I'm talking!
Yeah. This is what they got LA Knight doing right now. Feuding with not even the main guy in the Brawling Brutes. He's feuding with one of the supporting characters. And of course, it's the same story as every time we talk about an LA Knight match. I know he's supremely talented. You know he's supremely talented. The crowd knows he's supremely talented. Unless management is blind, deaf, and or mentally retarded, it's kind of hard to buy the idea that even they can't see that the guy's supremely talented. So you think to yourself, okay, if that's the case, why do they continually beat the guy on TV every week? And the answer is usually the same most of the time. It's, I have no idea what their thought process is. If you didn't directly piss into somebody's coffee, the only other option I can think is, for whatever reason, they just don't want the guy to get over. Despite the fact that he already is. Of course, the best spot in the whole match is right when LA Knight cuts off Butch on the top turnbuckle and gives him one of the best superplexes I've ever seen executed. Naturally, the fans all begin an LA Knight chant because of how impressive the spot was, even though I think he's supposed to still be a heel. Like I said, everybody likes the guy. Yes, he can be a natural heel on camera. He knows how to be a personality. But at the same time, when the people acknowledge how good he is, makes it kind of hard to hate him. Especially when he's really good at what he does. And we've been saying for months now, why do they continue to job him out? Well, perhaps, just maybe, this was the early beginning of a reconcile period. Because, write this one down, they actually put LA Knight over.
Yeah! Yeah!
Relatively clean, in fact. Which I was a tad surprised at. He gets out of an armbar by using the ropes. He temporarily rolls out to the floor. When Butch goes to pull him back into the ring, Knight yanks Butch headfirst into the ring post. Then he throws him back in. Blunt force trauma DDT. 1, 2, 3. And in big bold letters I wrote down, LA Knight wins. Yeah.
Yeah! Yeah!
Now, I don't know what that means in the long term. Was it a temporary thing? Was it a way for them to shut up all the fans from bitching about them constantly beating the guy? Who knows? I mean, I would hope this wasn't just a fluke thing where the next time we see him wrestle, they beat him again. You know, part of that whole 50-50 booking mentality with WWE. I have no faith in their ability to actually capitalize on the guy, but we'll see. He's still over. The people are still rooting for him. Beating Butch isn't that much of an accomplishment at the end of the day. Oh, man. I just hope they don't wind up drafting him to Raw. I need some more LA Knight on these SmackDown shows, man. Moving him over to Raw is like taking away one of the only two good things that's keeping me watching this show right now. Please, once his draft is complete, please keep LA Knight on SmackDown. He needs to be a sole feature of this program every week. So following that, we all know WWE loves to dish out the legends for these special occasion shows. So coming in for a one-night cameo to pick the round 2 draft picks, it's Rob Van Dam in a full suit and purple sneakers, as well as Michael Hayes coming out to the Bad Street USA music, which I'll admit was pretty awesome. And once I got over the ridiculous visual of seeing Rob in a formal suit, and he was at least somewhat lucid here, I thought they missed a golden opportunity to bring out Matt Riddle so they could do a promo battle together. See which guy could cut the more comprehensible promo without slurring their speech. Kidding aside. The next draft picks were as follows. Coming over to SmackDown, it's the Street Profits. Angelo Dawkins and Montez Ford, which I don't really have an opinion on either way. This one, however, broke my heart. Not in the sense of the full group, but singling out one individual. Hilarious how they gave Rob the 3 names that were among the most difficult to pronounce, too. But going to Raw, unfortunately, all 3 members of Imperium, including the Intercontinental Champion, Gunther. You could tell, too, when Rob was reading those names on the cue card, he was trying so hard not to fuck them up. He probably read that like 80 times in the back before he went out. Ludwig Kaiser, Giovanni Vinci. Just making sure he got every letter out so he didn't butcher it. And, oh yeah, that sucks. Gunther now being exclusive to Raw. I was like, they had to do me dirty like that. You know, Vinci and Kaiser, I can kind of take or leave, honestly. But Gunther, really? You just had to take the knife and thrust it directly into my jugular? Now, with any luck, you think about it for a minute. If the IC champ is going over to Raw, that would probably mean the Theory would be coming over to SmackDown, right? He's the U.S. champion, as we currently know, right? So, I mean, if the trade-off is Theory for Gunther, it's not a bad one. The next pick was a little bit of a lifter-upper. Edge coming over to SmackDown. Which I know might not seem like the most exciting thing in the world, but, hey, I'll look at it this way, man. If it keeps him away from the Judgment Day and gives us some new, fresh top names to work with every week, I'll take it. And to round out this session, jumping over to Raw, Matt Riddle, which I'm not really opposed to. You know, Riddle's been back on television for like 3 or 4 shows now. They've already beaten him twice on 2 straight occasions to Solo. Putting him on Raw and getting him away from all the bloodline stuff might actually be a good thing. It is kind of odd, though. Okay, so Riddle's going to be on Raw now, but they're still doing the 6-man at the Backlash show with the Usos and Solo against Sami, Owens, and Riddle. Even though that is still going to be technically crossing brands together. I mean, I guess that match has already been official for a week or so now, so you can't really fault them directly, but it is weird. But that was the second round. Then it was followed with a triple threat tag match, pinning the newly drafted Street Profits against Ricochet and Bocce the Strowman, and the Latino World Order understudies. More names that I cannot pronounce and failed to jot down beforehand. All you need to know is that I saw that Braun Strowman match last week. I was not ready to subject myself to another one. Mainly when not these casted jabronis. It was also a three-way, and we all know my opinion on three-ways. So I used this opportunity to go refill my coffee mug. I left this on in the background, and when I came back in the room, the Street Profits were standing in the middle of the ring with their hands raised. So I take it they won. Good for them. With any luck, maybe we'll get an explanation on what they mean by "we want the smoke." Are they cigarette fans? Do they prefer cigars? Perhaps weed? I don't know. What does that mean? We want the smoke. Sounds like one of those Gen Z phrases that I don't understand. That's a whole culture in and of itself. It's like when I hear people say, so-and-so is based. I'm like, what the fuck does based mean? All these fucking jingoisms these young kids are using. I said I don't have many friends for a reason, so. Anyway. Another little trip down nostalgia lane. Coming out to announce the third round draft picks, JBL and Teddy Long. And I think Wade Barrett hit the nail on the head here. Teddy Long doesn't age a bit. Word. I mean, JBL actually looks pretty good too, but yeah, Teddy Long. We're reviewing those NWA Crockett shows from '87 right now when he was still a referee. Dude, he looks exactly the same facially. Only difference is he's had a little bit of hair on his head back then. But he's still got the signature Teddy Shuffle down. I thought he was just going to come out here to announce a tag team match, playa. But no, they were here to cover the next draft picks. So, jumping to SmackDown going forward, we have the almighty Bobby Lashley, which I think would have been better if they had Brock come out there to make the delivery. Coming over to SmackDown, Bobby! Bobby! Don't really have much of an opinion on that either way. Coming over to Raw is Drew McIntyre, which I was all right with. Drew's sort of been a non-factor on SmackDown ever since he lost to Roman in Cardiff last year. The stuff with him and Sheamus was kind of getting repetitive and old. Honestly, I'm not opposed to sending him over to Raw. You know, he really wasn't doing anything all that constructive on SmackDown anyway, so freshen it up a bit. See what happens. And like I said, you know, Lashley coming over to SmackDown, I haven't been too high on Lashley in a while, but, you know, a lot of that just kind of boils down to the booking. Feuding him with Omos wasn't exactly the best move in the world. But, I don't know. Maybe they'll find stuff for him to do. Hopefully it doesn't involve Bray Wyatt, because I know they were teasing that at one point. The next pick I was not thrilled with at all. And I like AJ Styles. Never had a bad word to say about AJ. But the fucking OC with Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson. Seriously? Seriously? Those two boring, bland-ass, uncharismatic job guys. Now I have to watch them on SmackDown every week, bore the brakes off me. Ugh. Yeah, I wasn't happy about that call. And I don't have anything against Mia Yim, or whatever her new name is now, Meechin. But, nah. The next time I get excited about a Gallows-Anderson segment will be the first time I get excited about a Gallows-Anderson segment. In any case, we can look at it this way. At least The Miz is staying on Raw. Good. They can have him. If that's the trade-off at the end of the day, that I have to watch the OC on SmackDown, but Miz stays on Raw, I'll accept that. I'll keep my mouth shut. After that was the Zelina Vega Sonya Deville match. And, yeah, that's all I really kind of have to say about that one. Speaking of the OC, didn't take long for them to get thrust out there, did it? By the way, I'm curious. Street Profits immediately traded over to SmackDown, come out 5 seconds later to work a match. The OC, drafted from Raw to SmackDown, immediately out there within 2 minutes. I thought the whole concept of the draft was that it was supposed to be a surprise. That nobody knew that they were getting drafted to either show. So why were the OC on SmackDown? Why were the Street Profits on SmackDown? Were they told beforehand? That sort of breaks the illusion, doesn't it? If we're all supposed to buy the idea that nobody knows where they're going to end up? Isn't that sort of the main appeal of the draft? Just saying. Maybe it's just me poking more plot holes and shit that doesn't make sense. But yeah, the OC, who were presumed to believe did not know they were getting drafted to SmackDown, oh, they were out here. And again, I like AJ. It was good seeing him here. It's been a hot minute since I covered anything about AJ Styles in the WWE. I just wish he wasn't surrounded by the big bearded eggheads. Plus Mia. And, well, they came down here to, I assume, cut a promo. They were quickly interrupted by the Viking Raiders plus Van Halen. And again, you're going to have to excuse me for a minute. Obviously, I don't watch Raw. I haven't followed much of anything regarding the OC business. But, are they supposed to be baby faces? Because here's what I saw. The Viking Raiders came out to pick a fight with the OC. AJ sat in the corner and watched as his crew beat the shit out of these three. They left him for dead. They hit their magic killer on one of the Viking jabronis. And then they walked off. And that was pretty much all there was to it. They won a fair 3-on-3 fight and made the Vikings look like complete utter jobbers. So are they baby faces? I'm just trying to get my bearings straight. I mean, either way, it doesn't change my opinion on them. But, guess we'll see what they wind up doing. Knowing the way WWE books, they'll probably end up having a 9-month feud with the Judgment Day. Which could be interesting. If you consider the idea of Rhea versus Mia. I mean, the other combinations I could take or leave. But it could be more enticing than the Judgment Day feuding with the fucking Legado lackeys. Anything's better than that. Anyway, you ready for more draft? Well, here come Road Dogg and Shawn Michaels to the classic DX music, which for the 10 seconds it lasted was probably the only good part of the whole round. Rapidly going to go through this one because it was kind of a dud. Damage Control is now coming over to SmackDown. Again, all three girls collectively. And again, I'm going to repeat the same question about Damage Control I have been asking since the moment they showed up. What is Damage Control? Why are Io, Dakota, and Bayley all of a sudden friends? What was the purpose for that group? What damage are they controlling? More importantly, why should I care about another meaningless mid-card faction when none of them have any belts? Especially a girls' mid-card faction. Have we gotten answers to any of these questions? I mean, here we are in mid-2023. This group has been around for a hot minute. Still kind of waiting. Anyway. Raw is now getting Shinsuke Nakamura, which I'm kind of ambivalent about. Like, Shinsuke had one match on SmackDown since he came back, and they were teasing a feud with him and fucking Karrion Kross. So either that program is going to get cut or Kross is going to wind up on Raw, which might be good news too. I mean, Karrion Kross, I don't hate him, but he really hasn't done much on SmackDown in the last 6 months. I think the bloom's kind of off the rose with that. So if he does wind up on Raw, good riddance. Okay, now this next pick, I actually had to go back and rewind it like 8 times just to figure out how the fuck you actually pronounce these names. Again, caveat with this, I have not watched NXT 2.0 since like the fall of 2021. I mean, we used to cover those shows on the channel before I just gave up and said, this shit sucks and I don't want to watch it anymore. I have never seen these girls before. I have no idea how long they've been wrestling in NXT. But I'm going to do my best to not completely butcher their names here. By the way, the current NXT Women's Tag Team Champions. Because it's not enough that we have a main roster set of women's tag belts that nobody gives a fuck about. Apparently, they also need a developmental women's tag team champion. And the names, again, I'm doing my best here. Alba Fire and Isla Dawn? Am I even remotely correct in my pronunciation? Okay, if not, I apologize. As I said, I know nothing about them. I don't know if they can wrestle. I'm hesitant to find out, quite frankly. But, I mean, if they're getting called up to the main roster, there has to be some improvement in their training, right? Right? Someone please say right. Well, as we wait to see where all that goes, speaking of NXT call-ups, apparently Raw is now getting Indy Hartwell. I remember Indy. Yeah, good old Indy Hartwell. Y'all remember those classic NXT days when Indy was running around trying to fuck Dexter Lumis every week? And you had Johnny Gargano out there swimming in the ocean with a shark fin on, trying to prevent Dexter and Indy from getting at it in the hotel room. The classic scene where Dexter pulled out a wrap of condoms from his pocket while Johnny was hiding in the closet. Yeah, good times. Actually, now that I think of it, isn't Dexter Lumis on Raw? Oh, that's going to be awkward. Are they going to try and reunite together? Now I kind of want to watch Raw to find out. Will we get the 2-year payoff of seeing Dexter and Indy reunite as a couple? I mean, they were married, weren't they? In kayfabe. Oh, how the plot thickens. Yeah. So Raw gets that. Meanwhile, I have to sit here on SmackDown and watch Alfonso Fire and Isis Dawn. Well, we'll see. I mean, I need more piss breaks in a given week, so we'll see how long it takes. But that all basically took us to the main event. The Tag Team Championship rematch with the Usos going up against Sami and Owens, with about another 10 minutes of infomercials in between the entrances. Kevin Owens delivering the line of the century by going, "I'm so sick of waiting, let's go." Probably as a shoot. Standing there with dick in hand waiting for WWE to finish all their stupid plugs. If there's anybody that doesn't have a problem breaking the fourth wall, it's Kevin Owens. Anyway, well, this match, I kind of broke down into 2 separate categories. there was the first part of the match that just kind of existed. And then there was everything that trailed the split screen with Paul Heyman and Solo Sikoa. For a while, it was just kind of a regular, normal tag match. In terms of excitement level, it wasn't anywhere close to the initial buzz for the tag match at WrestleMania, where everyone was clamoring to see Owens and Zayn actually win the belts. The problem here is nobody expected the Usos to win, so the suspense was more on what was going to happen with Solo. And they're out there wrestling. The intensity level is starting to pick up a little bit by the time they come back from their second commercial pitch. All four guys are hitting the big moves and breaking out some of the false finishes. And finally, they go to the split screen with Paul Heyman getting the phone call. Him and Solo are watching the monitor. And in typical slimy Heyman delivery, he just goes, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir." And then he gets that maniacal, classic, evil grin. And he goes, "Yes, sir, my tribal chief." So we obviously know who was on the other line. Then Heyman looks over Solo's shoulder and goes, "That was the call. Now's your time." And like fucking Frankenstein's monster, dude, Solo stoically turns and he walks off while Heyman watches him with bated breath. And it was good. I like that angle. Because now, for the first time in the match, I'm actually on the edge of my seat wondering what's going to happen. So, the match is kind of trudging along. Owens ends up getting the stunner on Jey Uso for a near fall. And right as he gets back to his feet, here comes Solo, slowly meandering down the rampway. And right as I'm rubbing my hands together, waiting to see what Solo's going to do, well, he gets cut off by Riddle in a backwards baseball cap. And as typically done with every brawl segment in the history of modern wrestling, they fought off, completely vanishing from sight, never to be seen again. And that was the payoff for the mid-match angle. Clickbait. Meanwhile, the Usos are doing their super kick party on Owens, completely killing the idea that that move can ever be bought as a finish again. Shawn Michaels is probably rolling in the locker room with how overexposed that move is. And with about a minute left of airtime, after we've seen Owens get hit with approximately 47 super kicks in a row, the Usos then set up for their 1D. Sammy reaches in and pulls out Jimmy, throws him into the steps, and then Owens hits Jey with a stunner, setting up Sammy for the haluva kick in the corner and the pin. And they stay on it for approximately 15 seconds before the show ends. That was the WrestleMania rematch that we were all looking forward to. Well, I'll give it this. Before the Riddle swerve, they had me with the Solo thing. And you can definitely see where they're going with that particular angle. Obviously there's going to be the moment where Roman sicks Solo onto Jimmy and Jey and has them beat the shit out of them. That story kind of writes itself. Now there's sort of an incentive, considering the Usos lost this match. I did wonder to myself, though, what exactly was the plan if Jimmy and Jey won? Like, take out Riddle from the equation. Let's just say Solo went down there and proceeded with the plan as is. Like, obviously, him, Roman, and Paul Heyman are stirring something up behind the scenes. Let's say he went down there and he was supposed to screw over Jimmy and Jey. But what if they won? Was Roman planning on having Solo turn on them anyway? Just to be a dick? I don't know. I'm curious. Regardless, like I noted, nobody thought Owens and Zayn were dropping the belts here. But I do like the dynamic of them keeping the Usos out of the draft right now. Like Roman and Solo being exclusive to SmackDown with Jimmy and Jay still hanging out in the periphery. It makes for an interesting story. If they go to Raw, then that basically ends all the bloodline stuff for all intents and purposes. But if they stay on SmackDown, there's the chance that Roman still has Solo take them out, with Paulie kind of directing traffic behind the scenes as Roman's supporting act. And I've said before, this whole bloodline follow-up after WrestleMania hasn't exactly been the most compelling story. The Riddle thing kind of looks like it's being put on the back burner because he's going to go to Raw now, so that's good. But there's still been something missing in this whole equation. And I think we may have found the answer. I've said the bloodline stuff should probably have ended not long after WrestleMania. And while it was maybe okay to keep things going for a little bit longer, just to kind of put a bow on the loose ends and send the bloodline in a new direction, I think we've about reached the point where they need to capitalize on that. You put the babyfaces over in that six-man match at the Backlash show. You have Solo take out the Usos and leave them for dead. Roman and Solo go to SmackDown with Heyman as the mouthpiece. Jimmy and Jay maybe go to Raw. And now you have a way to continue some of the bloodline story in moderation. But at least it's entering a new chapter. Because if Solo's going to be the guy that eventually beats Roman later on for the belt, at least that would make sense with him still being closely tied to Roman as his muscle. I still think Cody was the better option to go with, but if Raw's going to have its own exclusive world championship now, then I can see where the long-term story of Solo versus Roman would actually fit in. Didn't make all that sense before WrestleMania because I didn't think they were actually going to introduce a new top belt on Raw and have two world champions again. I mean, wasn't that kind of the whole concept of the undisputed world champion for WWE? Now they're just going right back to the well with having two world champions again? But, just saying. Again, not necessarily what I would have done, but I can at least see how they've gotten from point A to point D, now that points B and C have kind of connected together now. Again, doesn't mean I'm particularly sold on it. I have plenty of issues with the whole handling of that situation. Introducing a new top belt on Raw just to have an outing so that Roman didn't have to lose. To me, that's stupid. But I get it. So we'll see how it all pans out. But that was night 1 of the draft. Night 2 taking place on Raw, which I will not be covering for obvious reasons. It should kind of put some finality to the bigger names. I'm just going to kind of reiterate what I said earlier, though. If this ends up being a case where they treat the brand split as a real thing, and they don't just wind up having guys randomly jump ship from show to show every week, I'm willing to see where it goes. If anything, I'm looking forward to seeing some new, fresh feuds, because Lord knows I've been complaining about the same guys touching every single week on this show, so small favors, I guess. But we all know the way WWE works. More specifically, Vince. But he's only moderately hands-on with creative right now, from what we hear. Maybe this won't actually be bullshit. Time will tell. Place your bets now. In any case, as we wrap this show up, we'll prepare for next weekend when we have the WWE Backlash show to run down. So I do have to get this uploaded to YouTube and Rumble, so I have to do my editing process. Not going to hang on with the outros here, but thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you on Friday for the Dynamite Report and the continuation of our Classic Retro Review series. Have a good one. Peace out.